I think we're ready. Hello and good evening. My name's Kevin Graf. I'm the president of the Park Board of the Elmhurst Park Board of Commissioners and have been a resident for 30 years and have been on the board since 2015. My fellow commissioners and I voted unanimously on August 5th to give the residents of Elmhurst the choice to fund high priority projects identified by the community. So I'm happy to be here tonight representing the board and as we answer some of the questions you have related to the referendum. Jim?
Thank you very much, Kevin. My name is Jim Rogers. I'm the Executive Director of the Elmhurst Park District. I've worked for the district for more than 30 years and have lived in town nearly that long as well. As Kevin said, we're happy to be here tonight to answer questions about the referendum and provide a little background as well. We very much appreciate so many of you attending. We've received more than around 40 questions ahead of time, so we'll start to get to those in just a minute. First, I'd like to take a few moments to kind of give an overview of what's being proposed on the referendum and the thinking behind how we got here. While I'm doing that, feel free to type in any new questions in the chat below, and we'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can in the next 60 minutes. However, with so many questions having already been shared, we may not get to everything tonight while we're on the call. So if we don't, what we're going to do is we'll post answers to those questions that we receive after this later on our website. I also do want to mention that we're recording this session tonight so we can share it with those who are unable to attend. So without further ado, let's jump in. So again, very excited, as Kevin said, that we're in the midst of this Elevate Elmhurst Parks referendum effort. I'm going to hope that those of you attending have received one of our mailers that came out this past weekend, either on Saturday or maybe Monday, which is chock full of some good information as well. But in kind of a quick nutshell, the plan and the referendum that we're proposing are based on a tremendous amount of community feedback that we received primarily during 2023. We reached out to the community and the community responded big time. We received over 4,800, or we had over 4,800 individual touch points with residents, whether that be at open houses that we held, our community survey that we conducted. We had some terrific online engagement tools. We had a map called Social Pinpoint that allowed folks to go online and pinpoint a park and make a suggestion or an area of town where they'd like to see something. And it was very, very effective. And as always, the community was very responsive and gave us a lot of input. With that, then we took that input and examined it and have come, and it is apparent that the community has some very significant priorities that they would like the Park District, quite frankly, to improve and enhance. And those relate to things related to indoor recreation and as well as outdoor recreation. From the indoor recreation perspective, what we're looking at in terms of addressing that is reimagining the Wagner Community Center to provide year-round recreation for all ages. Many of you may know that the Wagner Community Center today is a 1950s elementary school. Quite frankly, it primarily serves residents under the age of 12, although we're very proud of our adult dance program that serves residents from the ages of 22 to 95. So that's one program where we definitely serve adults at Wagner, but would love to be able to do a whole lot more, and that's what the community is telling us they would like to see. So the plans for the new center call for indoor gymnasium space, an elevated 3-lane walking running track that will be free to residents, indoor artificial turf, which does not exist much of anywhere in the community, expanded gymnastics center, expanded dance spaces, multi-purpose rooms to meet the community's needs, and a secure, separate early childhood center for programming for the tots in the community as well. In addition to that, those indoor recreation priorities, the community also told us about some outdoor recreation priorities they'd like to see us address. Chief among those would be to have more permanent restroom buildings available in our parks to take the place of locations where we currently have porta potties. And those would be in locations including Eldridge Park in the south end of town, Crestview Park at the north end, in Wilder Park, and then also one along the Illinois Prairie Path. In addition, outdoor priority is looking at doing a permanent community band shell in Wilder Park. Literally for decades, the Elmhurst Park District has offered concerts, performances, movies in the park at Wilder, and they've been very, very well received, but always with temporary staging. We used to have a thing called a showmobile, which was kind of a stage on a trailer that we backed into the park, and the community is telling us they'd like to see something permanent and something better and a higher caliber than that. And then in addition, from an outdoor perspective, we're also looking at converting one of our natural grass full-size soccer fields up at Barron's Park to artificial turf as well. Right before we get to the question, a couple of other points I'd want to note is that The Elmhurst Park District hasn't gone to referendum since 1971. That was 53 years ago. That referendum was kind of similar. It addressed facilities and a number of park improvements throughout the community. And we're excited to now, more than half a century later, to be back giving the community the choice to fund this referendum. We know that the needs exist and the community desires these things, and we're at a place now. The park board is very excited about it, as Kevin expressed, and we've got some park board members, I believe, even on the call or the Zoom tonight to give the community the choice to decide if it wants to fund these things. And with that, I think we're going to jump into the questions. We'll just kind of work our way through. Kevin, you want to start with the first one?
Sure. So I just read it out loud here. It's how long will the 3-lane running walking track be? For example, how many laps to a mile? So the plan is to have an eighth of a mile walking track. So 8 times around would be a mile.
Fantastic. Appreciate that. Folks also asked the question of will we, meaning the residents or the voters, I should say, be voting on all of the projects together, or will they be voting on them separately? And they will be together as one question, and that's because what we're trying to do is address as many of the community's needs, or the highest priorities needs, I should say, that the community addressed. And that's what the expanded Wagner Center with from the indoor facilities perspective, or indoor recreation, I should say, and then the outdoor amenities and what that addresses. So if you're interested, I should mention lots of the information that we're going to talk about, the answers we're going to give. Some of it's contained in the mailer that you got, but really almost all of it is on our website as well. And as well as that, what made me think of it is that we've got a sample copy of the referendum question that will be on the ballot.
So another question was, how many years would this be in effect, or how many years would the increase be on the tax bill? Well, this is very similar to a home mortgage for the community, and it's going to be a 25-year bond. And so in 25 years, it would be in effect and then drop off. It wouldn't be a rolling tax increase or anything like that.
Right. Thank you, Kevin. Yes, it will not be a permanent tax increase. Another question that someone asks is, how were the cost projections for these projects calculated? The individual indicates that they think that they seem high. We worked with a firm called Dewberry Architects. They're an architectural and engineering firm that has built literally hundreds of buildings and facilities nationwide throughout the country. They happen to also have an office based here in Elmhurst, and we're working with them there at that location. But they did specific cost estimating to look at what it would cost to build these. And one thing that's very important to consider with that as well, and we've been asked this a couple of times, is that those cost estimates take into account an inflationary factor, and we'll talk a little bit later about the timeline of the project, but take into account the fact that we would be looking at starting construction in 2026 and it going through 2027 and maybe a little bit into 2028. So the costs take into account the fact that we're not starting construction today.
So that kind of wraps into the next question, which is, where will the activities or programs go when the new Wagner Center is being built? And then obviously you kind of answered the next question, which was, when is it open, or when would it be open?
Right. So in terms of where programs will go, we will have to temporarily relocate and move all of our programs and services out of the existing Wagner Center, because this plan would call for demolishing that building and building this new building in its place. We will first maximize the use of existing Park District facilities to the fullest extent we possibly can. And then we imagine what we'll look at doing is renting some space in town. The district went through a similar circumstance like this about 20 years ago, and we rented some storefront retail space. We've mentioned to folks in the community that if you're an Elijah's Coffee fan down on Villette by the railroad tracks, that building actually 20 plus years ago was a Sunbeams and Rainbows preschool location for the Elmhurst Park District, that and a couple of the other units next to it. And so we rented that, and then we also rented some warehouse space that housed our gymnastics and dance programs and more of our movement type programs, and we will look to undertake something like that. In terms of the specific timing of things, what we're looking at is, if the referendum were to pass in November, we would spend most of the year of 2025 doing more detailed architectural and engineering work. It's important to note that on the website you can find conceptual plans and images of what the facility would look like and what the square footage would look like. But we have not gone any farther into detailed plans than that, and that's because the park board, looking to be wise tax stewards for the community, we don't want to spend more dollars on more detailed plans when we don't yet know if the community has decided if they want to fund that. So that's as far as the plans go. But in terms of the timing of things, we would do that more detailed planning in 2025, and then we would move our programs out beginning in fall of 2025, and they would be out for 2 years until fall of 2027, when the new Wagner Community Center would open, and we would move everything back in. I'm sorry, Kevin, I should mention, just because it fits, the other projects, the band shell, the restroom buildings, would kind of follow along with that in that same time frame.
Yeah, so the next question on here is, where will the restrooms be on the Prairie Path? Restrooms seem to be it was actually the highest rated amenity that people wanted. So where will it be? Well, we haven't decided yet because we want to see if the referendum passes. We didn't want to spend any effort or time on trying to identify. But again, if you're like me, you look at three or four different places along the Prairie Path that it could be. It could be at Spring Road, where we already have water service. It could be at Pioneer Park, where we already have water service. Or it could be down at Safety Town, where there's also a drinking fountain where we have water service. So again, we're trying to look at it strategically to see where the best place would be to put it.
And one other thing I would add to that as well, if the referendum passes as we move forward with the planning for that restroom building, and really in any of the parks, we will look to seek additional community input as those decisions are finalized. Next question, and I'll kind of apologize in advance. The questions kind of jump around, but we literally, as they came in, we just kind of started the list, so they're in no particular order. I should mention that as well. This next question speaks to existing the district's finances and existing district fund balances. And the question is, are they deemed adequate for ongoing operations or in excess of current needs? The park board has a very specific policy regarding fund balances. They exist for two purposes. One is to protect the district and the district's assets on behalf of the community in the case of an emergency. For many, many years, a lot of businesses or governmental entities like the Park District have done that, and you kind of thought that that rainy day would never come, but we saw back in 2020 that in fact that rainy day came, so we were very glad as a district to have those available. In addition to that, we have a second tier of fund balances, and those dollars are specifically earmarked for capital repair and maintenance of our existing assets and facilities and parks. The district has has 30 parks that we maintain, over 500 acres, over 24 buildings, and those funds are earmarked to make sure that we're able to maintain those facilities. Over in our long-term capital plans, they call for approximately $30 million in capital needs for, again, kind of the term, taking care of what we have over the next 10 years. So that averages out to about $3 million a year, which is what we currently accomplish on about an annual basis. So sorry, so Kevin's the last point I would make. So we don't have dollars, and we can talk a little bit more about the finances, but we don't have dollars available to fund projects of this scope. And then the other point I'll make, we mentioned in our presentations that we've been doing in the community, is that this is a good thing for the taxpayers of this community. The park board could not just decide to go out and sell a bond to fund the new Wagner Community Center, because we are limited by something called a non-referendum bond limit. And that's a good thing. As Kevin said, as we both said, we're both taxpayers in the community as well. And what this non-referendum bond limit says is that the park board can only decide to take on so much debt without going to referendum and getting basically the community's approval and permission to do that. And that's a good thing. The example I like to give is that if I wanted to go out and buy a $5 million house, and I went to the bank and the bank said, we'll approve you for a $500,000 mortgage, means I can't buy the $5 million house. And that's kind of where the park board sits right now. We have a non-referendum bond limit that is not even close to being sufficient to try to enable us to address the needs that are proposed in the referendum.
All right, moving on to the next question. Why build an indoor soccer field suitable for only U9 and below? And what are the U10 to 18 teams supposed to do? Was it considered for a new field to be expanded to accommodate all youth ages?
And that's a great question. Thanks, Kevin. And we've been getting it from in a number of the meetings that we've been in. And first of all, yes, we considered larger size fields. We considered smaller size. And that goes for, quite frankly, every component in the proposed Wagner Center. The gyms, the turf, gymnastics, dance, you name it. And what it all came down to really was balancing the needs of the community versus the cost versus the available land versus the other programming needs. So that's kind of how we settled on the current sizing and availability for each of those activities. What we also like to tell folks is that because we know that a lot of folks in our community go to other communities to have their recreational needs met by bigger, better facilities. But the turf that is being proposed here is comparable to the Ackerman facility in Glen Ellen and also to the Arc in Woodridge. And one of the things that we like in the plans is that both the turf and the gymnasium are approximately 25,000 square feet. So from sort of an equitability perspective in terms of providing for different activities, we feel very good about the fact that if you're a basketball, volleyball family, or if you're a soccer, lacrosse family, that we're trying to meet those needs equally as to what makes sense, can fit on the site, and might be something that the community would decide to fund.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, when we looked at it, space is a premium, and I think it's really important to look at those needs and try to balance that across all different aspects, whether it is gym space, turf, and also dance and gymnastics. So
Absolutely.
So we tried to do a balance of both.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. Our next question that we had here was about the timing, but we've mentioned that the schedule for the proposed projects. The next question was, has the design for the Wagner Center been finalized? The rendering looks like we'll be using significant green space at Wagner and Barron's for the building and for parking. Do you have details on the amount of green space the community will be losing? If you look, if you're able to go online, you'll see the plans and the layout of those, and you can see where the Wagner Center itself stays basically on the Wagner Center property. It will take up where the building sits now. It will take up most of the current parking lot, and then we'll take up that green space to the east or the far end of the building. The design was very intentional to try to put the bigger, taller parts of the building farther into the site and farther to the back, so as to be mindful and respectful of the neighbors in the neighborhood there who live in and around the center. So the shorter one-story parts of the building are towards the front. And then in terms of the park itself, yes, the parking lot comes out into what is now Soccer Field A and takes some of that green space up. We are aware of that. In terms of, but again, trying to balance in the landlocked community how to provide a larger facility and meet the indoor recreational needs of the community and balance those with the outdoor recreational needs. One of the ways we're trying to mitigate that, there's two ways we're trying to mitigate that loss of that soccer field. One is by, as I mentioned earlier, proposing that the field next to the parking lot become artificial turf, because artificial turf can be used much greater amount of time on a daily basis and a yearly basis, monthly during the season. And then also looking at the indoor turf, helping to address that as well.
Yeah, and this is kind of a follow-up to this next question, Jim, which is, has the Park District contemplated the impacts to the neighborhood and of adding a high-use facility right next to Barron's? And were other locations considered for this facility?
Yep, it's a great question, and very proud to mention that just a couple of weeks ago and even earlier in our planning process, we have taken the neighborhood into account. We held a meeting specifically for the neighbors who live adjacent to the existing facility and who would be impacted by that. Got a lot of terrific feedback from them. And what we were able to share with them is that we have this conceptual design, but it is a conceptual design right now, and we will get into lots more detailed design and engineering and be able to consider and take into account ideas and thoughts and concerns that were shared. In terms of looking at other locations, we did look at some. In fact, we even also looked at other locations in Barron's Park. The challenge is, and you might hear this a couple of times during tonight's sessions, that as folks probably know, we're a landlocked community. And so the notion of putting it somewhere else on Park District property likely is going to impact whatever activity or amenity or open space exists in whatever park we might move it to. And then in terms of looking at purchasing other property, we had some plans a number of years ago that called for acquiring some property. Wasn't that well received by the community. Then the pandemic happened, and not to get into past history, but where we sit right now in the community is we're trying to be mindful of the cost of the overall projected project. And then also the fact that right now there really is not a lot of available open space to even be considered for acquisition if we were trying to look to put this somewhere else other than existing park property.
Great. So we go back to the restrooms here, and the question was, is there a plan for Crestview Park, and where is that going to be located in the park? And how will the existing building being used? And are there plans for the building as it is now or as it seems to be empty most of the time?
Want to thank whoever submitted this question very much. It's a very perceptive question. And you've probably noticed, maybe this is someone who lives up by Crestview Park. We love our north side neighbors up there. The building has been used less and less over time. And this is a perfect example of one of those buildings that we have that was originally built for another purpose. It was originally built by the Crestview Park Neighborhood Association, and then the district acquired it decades ago. But it has significant accessibility issues, and just doesn't really meet the current needs of the community. So the idea up there would be that that building would come down because we would have so much more increased space at Wagner Center, and that we would replace that building basically with the permanent restroom building there, which would serve users of the playground, users of the ball diamonds, users of the basketball and pickleball courts. So we would be excited about making that improvement in the park.
Yeah, and also I just want to add that while we're doing some of these, hopefully doing some of these improvements to some of the parks, we will be looking at it from a master plan perspective for Crestview, because Crestview is one of the parks that we're going to be replacing in the next couple of years.
The playground.
Right, based on the schedule. So while we do that, obviously some of this other things like the restroom and the placement, the playground placement, things like that are going to be looked at.
Right, exactly. We want to be very thoughtful and intentional, and consider all of that rather than just doing things on a kind of a piecemeal basis.
So the next question, Jim, we have is the park district prepared to take care and maintain restrooms on a year-round basis? Isn't it clear that there's going to be a significant use during the winter months, which means they could easily be used for undesirable purposes?
Sure, happy to address that. And we've had this question asked in a number of our presentations as well. And one thing I like to make folks aware of, if you're already not, in a number of our parks right now, we have existing bathrooms that are open in a similar basis, and we manage those in a couple of different ways. One is when we say that they'll be open year round, want to clarify, they will not be open 24 hours a day. We have crews that go out in the morning and open all of our public restrooms at approximately 7 a.m. and then the restrooms are locked for the evening when the park closes. Parks that don't have lighted park amenities like ball diamonds and things like that close at dusk, those restrooms are locked earlier. Parks that do have lit lights, those restrooms are locked when the lights go off in the evening, 10 o'clock usually, sometimes 11. In addition to that, for the district, we also have a program, may or may not be aware of, called our Park Ambassador Program. And these are staff who work for us during the heavy months of the year. You might see them in the park sometimes. They'll be wearing a red polo shirt and a red ball cap. And they are basically going around and serving two functions. They serve as roving customer service for the park, able to assist park patrons as necessary. But then also they monitor the park for us. And so they check on restrooms, they check on playgrounds and things like that. So that's kind of how we stay on top of that. And I also like to share with folks, and we're very fortunate in our Elmhurst community here, is that we do not really have much in the way of vandalism, much in the way of undesirable activities that take place in the parks, in our park restrooms. And a great example of this is to give that the Wilder Park Conservatory is open to the public. I want to say, I think it's something like 363 days a year. We unlock it in the morning. It's open for the community and residents and non-residents and visitors to the park to enjoy, and then it's locked in the evening. And we don't really have lots in the way of undesirable activity. So we hope that would continue, but we're always mindful of it and do what we're able to monitor.
Sure. Okay. So the next question we have is, are any of the requested funds anticipated to be used for pressing existing needs as opposed to allocated solely for new projects?
Sure, and happy to answer that. And the question goes on a little bit to talk about ball fields and ball field maintenance and things like that. And the way I'd like to address this, because the question kind of asks about, will this referendum address those? And it brings up 2 points. First of all, the referendum funds itself from the bond are limited by law, that they can only be used for construction of these facilities. They can't be used for operational costs. So even when the buildings are done, they can't be used to pay staff who might work in those buildings or maintain those buildings, or for the utilities to pay for the lights and gas and heat. They can only be used to build the projects themselves. But in terms of this question and some of those other needs that exist in the community, want to mention that the Elmhurst Park District has one of the lowest tax rates in all of DuPage County. And as a result, certain aspects, quite frankly, of our offerings do not measure up to surrounding communities or to really what the community would like to see, as is noted by this question. However, if the community votes to approve the referendum, we anticipate that the increased non-tax user fee revenues that would be generated from the new facility, combined with the fact that we'd no longer be having to expend funds to maintain the 1950s elementary school building, would enable us to put more dollars into other needs throughout the district. I would recommend, and maybe some of you are even doing it tonight on this call, please go to our website. Lots of information, and on one of the financial tabs for the referendum, you'll see a listing of all of the, a comparison, I should say, of all of the tax rates of DuPage County park districts, and you will see where the Elmhurst Park District is in the lowest 1/3 of all park districts in DuPage County. And so when folks ask us questions like, why don't we have this like this community or this like that community, you'll see a number of those communities that get asked about have higher tax rates than the Elmhurst Park District does. And many times it's because their communities have passed referendums to expand and enhance their offerings.
Yeah, and I want to add to this a little bit about the ball diamonds and the fields, in the sense that, we're in a partnership with our athletic committees and the athletic groups. And ultimately, the athletic groups make those decisions on whether or not they're going to play or not. But above and beyond that, in the past couple of years, the gym staff, we've made attempts, not attempts, we actually have, to increase the way that the maintenance of the fields, and we've bought dedicated equipment to do that. And quite honestly, I go around to all our parks, I said, in the residence, and to take a look at how they're being maintained, because we hear this very, very fairly often. And I think we're making progress in that. And I know we're going to continue to make progress in that, regardless of this referendum.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Next question is an interesting one, and appreciate whoever shared it. It says, what is the EPD's long-term vision for their properties? And had a chance to think about this a little bit in advance and wrote a couple notes. I would say that one thing is that not all of the park district's facilities are an average age of 50 to 60 years old, that they're much more aligned with meeting the community's needs, and that they're facilities that are built and used for their intended purpose, that they're not reused buildings, hand-me-downs, so to speak, and that they much more better meet the community's needs.
Okay. What are the plans for the courts in terms of expanding or selling it to IC?
Again, really glad that this question has been asked. Want to make sure everyone understands the Park District has absolutely no plans to sell what is Plunkett Park behind the IC field. And quite frankly, this is another good thing that protects the taxpayers' assets in this community. The Park District, except under very, very, very certain circumstances, is not able to sell land. The only way that land is able to be sold is if the Park Board would deem it to have no use to the community at all. And that certainly is not the case with Courts Plus, nor with Plunkett Park there. And I'll also add, and then that kind of leads into the next, playing into that question then, the question of selling it or expanding it. So there's no plans to sell. And also because a fitness center was the #2 ranked facility by the community in terms of importance and investment after an indoor jogging walking track. And so we know that there is tremendous need for fitness in the community, in addition to and despite the fact that in recent years there have been a lot of private for-profit clubs that have come into play. There is still a tremendous demand for fitness in this community. Also want to mention the question asked about expanding Courts Plus. Quite honestly, if you're familiar with Courts Plus or Plunkett Park, could we expand Courts Plus? Potentially, we could expand it in Plunkett Park. But the challenge of if we were going to try to expand is we have to have somewhere to be able to relocate the ball diamonds in Plunkett Park. And we can't relocate the ball diamonds because, as we've mentioned, a recurring theme, we're a landlocked community. So it kind of all fits together. Even if there was a desire to expand Courts Plus right now on that site, be nearly impossible to do without being able to move those ball fields somewhere else, which isn't really feasible right now.
All right, moving on to the next question about fees. Will there be a separate fee required to use the new Wagner Center and facilities similar to how we have the courts?
Right. Great question again. And the answer is no. The new Wagner Center will not be a member-based facility. It will be a community center similar to the existing Wagner Center now. So there won't be a membership to enter and utilize the facility. As we said, the elevated walking track will be free to all residents. We will continue to charge fees for our programs. So if you take a dance class or you sign up to be in our basketball league or you rent a multi-purpose room to hold a meeting or something like that, you'll likely pay fees for those types of things, but will not be a membership-based facility.
All right, moving on. A lot of discussion about attracting and retaining instructors to provide services at the new facility. Is there a concern that we have a capacity at the courts, but not enough instructors to make use of it? So will there be the same issue at Wagner?
Right. We don't think there would be an issue with Wagner. We think there would be a tremendous amount of excitement with an expanded facility, not only from the participant perspective, but from the employment perspective. There are hosts of programming opportunities that we aren't even able to consider because we simply don't have enough space for it. So generally, as a park district, now that we're well past the pandemic, attracting and hiring and retaining staff is not really generally an issue for us, and we don't think it would be with the new facility.
And also, as far as the um, facility being used, we had 5,600 wait lists in 2022 of residents that we couldn't serve. So we know that if we have this space, we're going to be able to expand on that and be able to serve those people that were on the wait list.
Absolutely. And then Kevin, in the next section here, we've got 2 or 3 questions asking about indoor aquatic facilities. And what I would want to say, because we're always going to be transparent and truthful with the communities, as folks have seen, I'm sure, this plan for the Wagner Center does not include indoor aquatics. We do recognize that there is a need or a desire for indoor aquatics in the community. However, when we have looked at the site and looked at overall in terms of what we are trying to provide, and quite frankly, what has been some of the longest standing needs, we've prioritized what is included in the plan right now. Quite honestly, as we've talked about kind of some of the deficiencies that we face as a park district, the fact that our park district is 104 years old and has no gymnasium space is just kind of beyond comprehension. And again, recognize those of you on the call feel the same way about aquatics. We understand that. We'd hope to try to be able to address that in the future, but the current plans don't call for that.
So I like this next one. This is more of a statement, but
Yes.
we need more park district dance class facilities are needed.
Right. And we're very excited that the plans for the new Wagner Center call for doubling the amount of square footage that we have available for dance classes. So we're very excited about that. And in addition, they would be, as we've talked about, facilities and spaces that were designed specifically for dance, not taking an elementary school classroom and putting in a floor and mirrors and bars and calling it a dance studio. What that means as well, we'd have appropriately high ceilings. We'd have spaces that are big enough so that our dancers and our dance troops can practice, and or I should say rehearse, in ways that fit them later on going on and being on a stage versus having spaces that are just too small. So yes, more dance spaces to come if the referendum passes, double what we have now.
So the next question we have is, has a comparative analysis been done to see how Elmhurst compares to park district facilities in Oak Brook, LaGrange, and et cetera?
Yes, that's a great question as well. And I'd like to kind of piggyback that question on with another question that's later. So this one is about, have we done an analysis to other facilities at other park districts? And then the second question was, why does the park district want to compete against other health clubs and daycare providers in the surrounding area? What make you think it will succeed? What other local park districts are doing this? So in terms of districts that we've compared ourselves to and the question of are other districts doing this, examples we would give would include Downers Grove, Carroll Stream, Glen Ellen, Wheaton, Woodridge, Bensonville, Naperville, Oak Brook, kind of the list goes on and on. Bottom line is we are behind other communities and deficient in what we offer in terms of indoor space and the types of indoor spaces we offer. And Commissioner Graf mentioned it earlier. In the year 2022, we had over 5,600 individual participants who were on wait lists that could not get into our program. So we are not concerned that if we offer more programs, people will come to them. But also specifically to address kind of the competition around health clubs and daycare providers, the Elmhurst Park District has been a provider of a health club, health and fitness club, tennis club, and been in the daycare business, quite honestly, for decades longer than nearly all of the private providers in town. So we know that the community looks to us to provide those services. We know that there is high demand from the waitlist I've provided. So we're confident that the demand is there and that the community is looking for the park to try to meet some of that demand.
So the next question is, do the outdoor pools close early in the evening due to lack of lifeguards? And I'll answer this because I asked this question when I wasn't on the board. And the answer is No, the answer is it's a fiscal responsibility based on looking at the numbers year over year when the attendance drops off and we have 8, 10, 12 lifeguards plus a manager sitting with one or two people in the pool. Well, I would love to service those one or two people in the pool to be fiscally responsible to our community. We close early than we have before.
That will close earlier at Smalley Pool, and then East End stays open later as the larger facility able to accommodate more folks who might want to use it.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Mhm.
So there's a concern about the band shell at Wilder Park in terms of it distracting from the wonderful green space. How can it be designed in such a way that it blends into the park and the landscape?
This again, fantastic question. So glad that it was asked. Please, if you get a chance, or if you're on our website now, go and look at the plans. We have put out a plan view to show where the band shell would be located. And for those of you who have been in the park before for movies or concerts in years past, the band shell will be in the same location that we have always done performances from. So in that northeast corner of the big great lawn that is east of the Wilder Mansion, it'll be tucked back kind of into the trees there and then play facing towards the southwest. But we are very mindful, and the park board is very, very mindful of the fact that that Wilder Park is really this community's gemstone of a park. We are so incredibly proud. It's where the Elmhurst Park District literally got its start. And we value and the park board does, values and respects very, very much how that park, that the character of that park, and our intention to be mindful of its place as a passive park in this community. And so the design will be very, very thoughtful and intentional as we move down that road. The other thing I would imagine, kind of like we mentioned with the restroom along the Prairie Path, if the referendum passes, we will, as we start down the process, we will also be looking for additional feedback from the community on how we would design that the band shell.
All right, I think we answered this, but I'll ask it. What
Yep.
is the EPD's long-term vision for their properties?
Oh, sorry, Kevin, my bad. You're looking at some questions that I printed, and I printed two sets.
Oh,
So we
okay.
can ignore
All
that
right,
one.
we'll skip that.
We will skip
I think we
down.
did.
We are to a question that reads as follows. The question, the concern about some of the other things that are being talked about in the community right now, increases in water rates, potential increases for a new police station, so on and so forth. And certainly those are, again, very legitimate, meaningful, and great questions. Again, Kevin and I both being taxpayers here in the community. The perspective that the board is taking on this is to say that these needs that are being expressed by the community are not new. These needs have existed in this community for years, and in some cases, decades. We are excited to put this plan before the community and give the community the choice to decide if it wants to fund it, irrespective of other things that are being contemplated, because honestly, there will always be other factors that the taxpayer needs to take into account when making a decision like this. So if we, as we've kind of crystallized our thinking around this, one of the things we've said is, if not now, when? Because we could say right now, well, this and this is being proposed, but if we decided, well, we'll wait 2 years or we'll wait 3 years, we don't know what will be being proposed or suggested or considered then. And so the park board has said, community, we hear you, we've put together these plans, and now you have a choice to decide if you want to try to address or want to look to fund those.
Got a couple people in the waiting room.
Yep, we got a couple more people in the waiting room looking to jump in. The word is probably out now that the session is going so well that we've got people waiting to get in.
Oh, do we want to add?
Yeah, hit on that one if you would. Yep.
Let's talk about the Cadillac. So the question kind of goes like this: perhaps we're not going for the Cadillac version.
Perhaps we shouldn't
go for the Cadillac version of the EPD, and a band shell that cannot be used year round and heated restrooms. Are these really essential? Why not go for essential needs for the EPD versus the gold standard version that may not be needed? And as the current referendum does not pass, then nothing gets done. Why not go with a less expensive plan with items that are truly needed, and you may have a better chance of getting it passed?
And that's a fantastic question. Very much appreciate that being asked. We've had that from a few folks as well. And what I would start off is by saying that this is not the Cadillac version of this plan. We answered some questions earlier, and we've been hearing from the community about folks who are saying this isn't big enough. The turf should be bigger, the gym should be bigger, it should have an indoor pool as well. If it could somehow be all of that, that might be able to be considered the Cadillac plan, but this absolutely is not the Cadillac plan in terms of what's being proposed. In addition, when we look specifically at at what's being contemplated in construction and construction costs we talked about earlier, the pricing and finishes that we're looking at in our cost estimating are mid-grade finishes. We are not looking at absolute high-end finishes that you might find in some sort of a luxury hotel or something like that. And quite frankly, as I said, some components that we're proposing might not even be big enough to meet the community's needs fully. And so one of the things that we're saying is that this plan, if the community decides to fund it, will work towards addressing the community's needs and demands. It will not eliminate those. This is not, because as I said, this is not the Cadillac, this is not the panacea that will eliminate all needs and enable us to meet all the needs of the community. It will allow us to address them, but not necessarily completely meet all of them.
Yeah, and I just want to add to this a little bit about, we did look at the Cadillac and we looked at that and we went out for that 6 years ago now. And the overwhelming feedback was that was too much. It was going to cost the residents of Elmhurst and myself way too much. So again, we started that process, pandemic hit, and now we're 4 years later, and now we're looking at something that we think and we believe will help address these needs of the community. I feel very proud about our plan. I feel very excited to do this for the community and for the residents of Elmhurst.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that very much. I think that we have addressed all of the questions that we received prior to the session. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing those. We've got a couple here that have been sent in since, and I know our staff will continue to check the chats. One question that was sent in was, how much has been spent so far on promoting this proposal? And in answering that, want to mention that the Park District can legally spend dollars only to educate and inform the community about the referendum. We cannot spend dollars to advocate that folks vote one way or another. I don't have sitting here with me tonight exactly how much we've spent. What I can tell you, it is not a significant amount compared to the district's annual budget or annual budget for marketing and communications. But that is a question that we will be happy to get the detailed answer to and include that on our website with any other questions that follow up afterwards. And then a second question that we've received is the question is asking about, has the Park District explored private developers to add to these amenities within our community? And we have, over the years, the district has entered into a number of public-private partnerships. The best one that we can cite is we have probably goes back 30, 40 years, partnership with Elmhurst University. And that has been tremendously beneficial to this community, in which where the university is landlocked, kind of like all institutions are in this community, but has an ever greater need for facilities for its athletic programs. And so we have partnered with them in a number of park locations. At Salt Creek Park on the Ball Diamond, that is a Division III caliber women's softball field. At Butterfield Park, where there's a Division III caliber men's baseball field, and on a synthetic turf field up at Barron's Park. And the beauty of that partnership is the fact that the university makes a significant financial contribution to assist with the construction of these enhanced facilities. And because they do so, they have first priority on using them. But really one of the beauties of it is the fact that because of NCAA regulations, college athletes can only practice and play so much in so many hours. And so what ends up happening is that the community gets these greatly enhanced facilities that then are able to be used by community sports, youth sports groups, York High School, things like that. So as an example, we were just running some numbers recently. This fall season that we're in right now, one of our synthetic turf fields was funded in part by the university. They're using it about 8% of the time during this fall, and the community is using it about 92% of the time. But when we funded that facility, the university paid for about half the cost of that. So we're very excited about that type of a partnership. We have not looked in this current plan beyond that at larger public-private partnerships. While they can be very beneficial, it ends up talking about a whole different ball game in terms of working with for-profit entities And quite frankly, what can happen in certain circumstances is that the profit motive can kind of become an overarching priority versus serving the community. And so one of the ways that can manifest itself sometimes is that rentals of facilities become a higher priority than, say, use by a community group. And so we're very mindful of that and want to make sure that if a facility like this is to happen right now for this community, that it really would be focused first and foremost on meeting the needs of our community. Going to ask our moderator, do we have any other questions that have come up? We do not have any other. So I'm just going to kind of give every one of you out there at your keyboards another minute to ask. If you've got any other questions, please feel free to send those along right now, and we'll just kind of
we'll
chat
play
a
some
little bit or play some elevator
elevator
music. I'm going to check. I'm just going to check our notes and kind of check the mailer that we sent out and see if there's anything else that we want. Oh yeah, here's something I'd love to hit on and mention for folks is that as you're considering your perspective on the referendum and how, bottom line, how much it might cost you, if you go to our website, we have a property tax calculator that you can use. And what you can do is you can take your own property tax bill, go to that calculator, enter in the equalized assessed value of your property, and it will tell you exactly how much it would cost you in increased taxes. We have on our website kind of like what would it cost for a $400,000 home, $500,000 home, but you could put in the exact value of your home if you would like to look at that. And I think we might have had a question pop up, Carrie.
Yeah,
I saw one come in on my screen. Let me see if I can find it here.
Yeah, I saw two, couple.
Uh,
Oh, how many people on a wait list?
Okay, 2023. Don't have wait list numbers at my fingertips right now for 2023. I'll be happy to gather that information and put that on the website as well. Question here, great question, and this has been asked as well. And kind of address or speaks to some of the questions that were talked around tonight. Will the basketball courts be rented to Airborne and Knights basketball, or will a rec basketball program be developed? I think the answer to both of those questions is yes. It will, with a facility of this scope and size, we would look to be able to be renting them to some of the youth groups in town, and then also have recreational offerings as well. Happy to let whoever asked that question know that Airborne basketball was part of an advisory group that we put together as we were looking at developing these plans. So wanted to make sure that kind of that Elmhurst-based basketball community was heard from as part of our planning process, and they've been with us
Great
every step of the
feedback.
way. Yep, and their feedback has been terrific. And then the other question, to be clear, based on what I heard tonight, this plan does not include any improvements to the baseball fields. That is correct. This plan does not propose improvements to the baseball fields. As we said, this is not a tax increase that we can use to do things like this. This is a bond that can only be used specifically for construction of buildings and facilities. So I hope
And
I've,
very
I
specific
hope I've
based
answered that.
on the question.
Right, based on what the question is that's out there. That's correct. But as we said, our hope, or not our hope, what we know will happen, because it's what happens now at the Park District, is that if this facility is built, we will generate significantly additional non-tax revenues, and then we would look to take some of those revenues in addition to operating and offering those programs at the Wagner Center to be able to funnel those into the rest of the park system. So we would look forward to being able to do that. Now, one of the point I'd make to that is that mentioned this in a meeting earlier today as well. The Elmhurst Park District Board has a policy that states that more than 50% of our revenues must come from non-tax sources. That is unique amongst park districts. Most park districts, not many park districts, receive the majority of their funding from property taxes. At our park district, we try to the park board tries to be mindful of how much we are taxing the community and rely instead more on user fees. And the reason for that is because the idea being that the taxes that you pay would go towards things primarily that the entire community could benefit from: parks, open space, trails, some of the maintenance, playgrounds, some of the maintenance to our facilities. But but then user fees go to pay for the costs associated with direct services and programs that you receive. So the example I give is that if Kevin and I live next door to one another and he doesn't have kids and I have little ones who are in our summer camp, we're both paying property taxes, but I'm also paying user fees for my kids to be in those camps. And those are paying for things like the wages that we pay our camp counselors. They're paying for the cost of the backpack that we give the campers. They're paying for the cost of going on those field trips. So I'm paying for those because my family directly benefits from those. Kevin doesn't directly benefit from those, so his tax dollars are not going really towards that.
Yeah, and again, I want to address something that wasn't totally asked here, but the the fitness component of this is the walking track, right? We're not putting fitness equipment up at this new Wagner Center or anything like that. It's not designed to be a fitness center. That's what Courts Plus is for, and that's totally separate from that perspective. And I just want that to be clear that there won't be any fitness equipment at this new facility.
It's a great point, Kevin. Thank you for asking that. And then a follow-up question that someone asked here. Are there not considerations to include additional indoor turf space so that that would be available to Team Elmhurst or ECSA programs? So kind of same with Airborne and Knights. We have had ASO and ECSA involved in as part of our advisory group. They've been with us in the planning all the way, helped us determine these the spacing and the sizes. And yes, similar to the indoor basketball, indoor volleyball, indoor soccer, indoor lacrosse, baseball, we look to be able to provide space to all of those groups. However, to the point I made earlier, it will not meet the needs of all of these groups. I was in a meeting with someone, a parent from Team Elmhurst, and I said to them, ask any one of these programs. They would love to have use of these facilities, I'm sure, 5 nights a week for their group. But that will not be the case. We will work with the groups to manage and plan and allocate time. Very similar to what we do with our outdoor facilities right now. We have a set objective process that we use to schedule fields and provide those to the groups, generally based on the size of the group, as to how much court time, or I should say field time, they get. And we would look to do something very similar with an indoor gym as well. Another point I want to make too, should have mentioned this earlier, around these questions around soccer and ball diamonds and things like that. And I'm actually going to grab a little note that I have here that I brought along with, and that is to speak to kind of how we arrived at where we are in terms of what we're looking at developing. And it speaks to the fact that when we asked the community about what needs they had and what unmet needs they had, things like ball diamonds and soccer fields did not rise high up on the list, because we offer over 30 ball diamonds and over 30 rectangular fields for soccer and lacrosse and things like that in the community right now, whereas we have virtually no gymnasium space and we have no indoor turf. So that's why those are the higher priority. I say that for the community right now and what's being proposed on this. But again, as I've said a couple of times, we're hoping if this were to happen, we're looking at the notion of generating additional revenues that could then flow towards addressing some of those other needs in the community.
Great question.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
What other towns along the Illinois Prairie Path have the public bathroom on it? We can do a little bit of research on that and perhaps try to find it. But what I do know, because when we've been doing these public meetings, is that, and this particularly comes from those who are kind of a little bit more of like hardcore runners, there's a known thing out there that if you're using the Illinois Prairie Path in Elmhurst and you have to go to the restroom, where do you go? And one of the answers is Villa Park, because there is a restroom facility in Villa Park. I think it's just west of Villa Avenue. So I know there are public restrooms there. I'm not sure if there are any east as you make your way into Berkeley, but certainly we know that there are not any here in Elmhurst other than porta potties in a couple of locations. Great questions. We appreciate all of those. We're going to just give one more peek to see if we have any others. We do not. And look at our time. Our time is perfect. Who doesn't like to go to a meeting or something like this and get out a few minutes early? So again, we want to really, really thank everyone for taking the time to be on here tonight, for sharing the questions. We hope we've accomplished our goal, which is our goal tonight, but also our goal throughout this entire process, is to make sure that the community is informed about what is being considered and what choice they have to make. We know people, and again, we trust the people on this call are folks who want to be informed voters. So please take more time, go visit our website. If you have more follow-up questions, there's opportunities on the website to send us additional questions and messages. We will be happy to address those. Last thing I'll mention, and my staff would kick me,
everything will be on the website.
Yep, everything will be on the website, including the recording of this, but staff would rightfully kick me if I forgot to mention this. Please make note in the flyer that you got or on our website and social media as well. We're also, in addition to doing this live virtual Q&A, we're holding 3 open houses up at the Wagner Center. One this Saturday, September 28th from 10 to noon. One on Tuesday, October 15th from 10 a.m. to noon, and one on Tuesday, October 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. We'd love for folks to come and stop by. You'll be able to see copies of the proposed plans, ask more questions, and get a tour of the Wagner Community Center as well. If you're not familiar with it, or if you are someone who's spent time up there, you'll get to see some of the behind the scenes things and some of the challenges that we face and why it really doesn't meet the community's needs, we believe, going forward into the coming years.
And I just want to say thank you to everybody that joined. Great questions, especially the ones that early on that we got in advance. It helped us print them out and be able to do this in a smooth fashion. And I just, as president of the Park Board of Commissioners, I just want to say thank you to the residents, because this is all your feedback. And this is your park district, it's your community, and it's your choice. And so, early voting starts tomorrow. So just remember, we all have a choice on voting.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.